What's up guys, welcome back to another video, and today I want to talk about 5 habits of people with ADHD that look lazy on the surface but actually aren't at all. And so the first sign is procrastination, and to other people this looks like you're just putting things off, like you don't care about them, you're avoiding work, or you're just being irresponsible. When in actual fact people with ADHD have real issues with executive function, which makes it really difficult to start tasks, to actually initiate what you want to do. And generally speaking, people with ADHD put tasks off, and so usually will wait until the last minute to get things done, to get that real dopamine rush. And I know for myself, I get overwhelmed by big tasks and the thought of how I'm going to start the task or tackle the task generally, and so I will put it off, mainly because I don't know where to begin. So thinking back to like my uni exams or exams in school, I would often put off any revision or anything till right at the last minute because it seemed so overwhelming, the task of this whole subject that I have to learn, that I would bury my head in the sand until the last minute and then cram everything in, and then surprise, surprise, not be able to recall any of it on the day. And a few tips that I've learned on how to deal with this generally in life. And the first one is the biggest one that I found, is just finding one real quick small win that you can do that is an in to the task. So if it is revising for the exam and it feels overwhelming, the whole thought of the subject matter you have to cover, you could just set a timer for say 2-3 minutes and say you're going to focus for that time entirely on what you need to learn for this exam. And once that 2 or 3 minutes is up, you're then done for the day. That's all you need to do. Generally what I would find happening in these situations is I would do my 2 or 3 minutes and then think, okay, that wasn't so bad, I can go on and do some more. And then before I know it, I've revised for 30, 40, 50 minutes, an hour, because I've built a little bit of momentum and I've got that quick win under my belt. The second big one that I found is to use some sort of external accountability. So whether that's finding like a study partner or a family member or someone that you are accountable to. So again, in the example of exams, if you have someone else that's doing the same exam as you, if you say to that person, right, we're going to cover this subject material and then we'll come back together and just make sure that we're both on the same page about it. You have that level of external accountability that you know you need to learn this stuff for not just yourself, but also this other person. That's really helped me. And the third one is the 2-minute rule. A lot of people talk about the 2-minute rule. If the task takes less than 2 minutes, do it now, don't put it off. It sounds so simple, but it's amazing what you can get done by following this rule, because it just stops you from overthinking the situation. If it's something so simple that it can be done in 2 minutes, just do it now. Okay, habit number 2 is being messy or disorganized. To other people, this looks like you're careless, lazy, or that you just don't care about your own space in general. What's really happening, at least this is how I see it, is that if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. People with ADHD have issues with object permanence. So the idea that if you can't see the thing, it doesn't exist at all. And so say for instance, you have like a disgustingly messy room somewhere that you don't go into all the time, that it frustrates other people, that you don't go in and sort it out. Because you're not seeing it every day, it's just not in the forefront of your head. You don't believe it exists. And then tying into the first one again, if it seems like such a massive task to do, you don't know where to start at the same time, so they kind of interweave. And again, going back to executive function, like I mentioned at the start as well, people with ADHD find it really difficult to maintain any good, healthy routines, and things like keeping your room clean or organization of certain tasks is something that we can really struggle with. So although it might seem really careless and lazy on the surface, there's much more going on if you sort of scratch beneath that. And a few tips that I've found can be really helpful for maintaining good organization and being tidy in general. The first one is really simple, and it's something called visible organization, and that's using things like clear bins or open visible shelving where you can physically see if something needs doing, if the bin needs emptying, if the shelves need tidying. Being able to see it all the time helps with that sort of object permanence, and it won't get lost in the back of your head. The second tip is, again, super simple and ties in with the first habit that I spoke about, and that is just using a 1-minute tidy up rule. So you literally set a timer for 60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes tops, and you just see how much you can tidy in that time. It's so simple, but it's a real good way of getting a quick win under your belt and keeping on top of things like that. And it doesn't give you that same sort of overwhelming sensation of there's so much that needs to be done or cleaned. It's a really helpful one. And the third one is just making these sorts of things a bit more fun and enjoyable, and a bit more sort of dopamine friendly. Things you can do: listen to music, podcasts, have a video playing in the background, whatever it is. Having the other thing going on just takes your mind off of what you're doing, and it makes it a bit more, as I say, dopamine friendly and a bit more doable for people who do suffer with ADHD. Habit number 3 is zoning out in conversations. It looks to others as though you're rude, don't care about what they're saying, or they're just flat out not paying attention. Whereas in actual fact, what's really happening is people's brains with ADHD struggle to pay attention for prolonged periods of time in general, particularly in long conversations. And so if you're not necessarily interested in what is being spoken about, your brain will naturally switch off to that to a certain degree. And it's not because you don't care, it's just because your brain happens to be wired more for stimulation rather than these long, deep conversations that take a lot of brain power. It can also be really frustrating because people with ADHD do tend to have issues with their working memory. So it can be really hard to maintain the thoughts whilst you're listening to someone else in order to keep the flow of conversation going naturally. A few tips that I found really helpful for this. The first one is repeating back key points so that you stay engaged, and you can even sort of paraphrase what that person said so that you are kind of weaving your own path in what they've said and making sure you understand it fully. So you can say things like, so what you said is X, or what I hear is blah, blah, blah. That can be really, really helpful just to reword things in your own mind as to how they work for you almost. And the second big one, and I think this is the most important, is just to be honest with the people that you're talking to about what's going on. Be upfront with them and say, my brain is really struggling to pay attention for any length of time today. If it seems as though I'm not interested, if it feels to you as though I don't care about what you're saying, that's not the case. I'm just kind of struggling at the minute with keeping on track and recalling what I want to say, keeping thoughts that are positive to the conversation in my head rather than just the intrusive thoughts and wandering mind that means it's coming across as me being inattentive and not caring about what you're saying. Habit number 4 is forgetting important things. This is a huge one. It feels as though you're letting people down, which is probably the most frustrating part. So it comes across as though you're careless, unreliable, or you don't care about other people's time. Whereas to me, what's actually happening a lot of the time is a thing called time blindness. And so what that means is I'm generally time blind to, firstly, how long tasks have taken me to do. So it may have taken me an hour. I think it's only been 15 minutes. Or how long future tasks may take me to do. The time to me just doesn't really make as much sense when I think about the planning of tasks and how long it's going to take me to do them realistically. And I think it's important to remember that we're not doing this on purpose, but things do slip through the net, and without external reminders, that is likely to continue as well. So a couple of tips that can really help with this. The first one, super simple. As I say, reminders can be so beneficial. So any sort of external memory aids, alarms, sticky notes, planners, whatever it might be, whatever works for you, to-do lists, they all can be so beneficial when it comes to just you keeping on track of things that need to be done. And when you're supposed to be meeting people here and there, or how long it's taken you in the past to do certain things, and how long it's likely to take you today. So you can plan your day a little bit more other people friendly, I say. Habit number 5 is going to be hyperfocus. So the feeling of I can focus on some things for hours on end without even trying, but other things I can't focus on for 5 minutes. It looks to others as though they can see you focusing on certain tasks for a long period of time and putting your all into it. So when it comes to other things, you must be choosing to purposefully ignore them. Say it's tidying or whatever it might be. You must be choosing to ignore doing that thing because you don't want to do it, when in actual fact it's just how your brain works. And what I mean by that is hyperfocus generally happens when the thing that you're doing triggers a dopamine rush. So it could be things like hobbies, video games, researching particular topics that you're really interested in. The time flies by and it doesn't feel as though you're having to really concentrate, take in all this information. The focus comes naturally, whereas things that don't produce this dopamine rush can make it makes you feel as though it's taking ages and it's a really laborious task for you to pay attention throughout this period. And so I think it's really important to remember that this firstly, it's not a superpower, and it's not a choice at the same time either. We don't necessarily control when it happens. It's just sort of serendipity that things all fall into place. So I think being mindful of that and being open with other people about what's happening can make you a little bit more kinder to yourself, and will also mean that other people have a bit more understanding as to what's happening for you. And so if hyperfocus is causing an issue for you, say you're getting stuck in video games or research rabbit holes that you go down for hours on end, a couple of really useful things that you can do. Firstly would be something called like a hard stop, which would be using things like alarms, timers, just things that if you know you have to go and do something later in the day and you're likely to get stuck into this one thing and the time's just going to fly by, having a hard stop with a timer set for an hour's time, it breaks that cycle so that you know that you need to disengage from what you're doing because you have other commitments to go to, and it keeps you accountable to those things. And as a second tip, if you know what you're generally hyper-focusing on is unproductive, try and channel some of that energy into something more productive. I know it sounds really simple, but finding some way of almost gamifying what you're doing, if it is again, studying for an important exam or something, trying to gamify it in some way, whether that is by you have to study for half an hour to give yourself a reward of something else. Generally, if you have that sort of reward center lighting up, that's the dopamine center, and it will mean that what you're doing will tend to produce a much more effective outcome because you'll be using some of that hyper-focus energy to channel it into a productive means, which will have a much better outcome for you than if you just stick to the Call of Duty or whatever, or FIFA or whatever it might be, and you're there for hours and the list of things that you need to do is just piling up. So those are just 5 habits that I thought I'd talk about that I'm very aware of in my own life that can cause some sort of detrimental effects. And although it seems on the surface as though they might be lazy or inattentive to other people's needs, it's just the way our brains work. And I wanted to kind of reassure you, I suppose, that that is the case for me as well, and I'm sure a lot of people watching, so just go a bit easier on yourself. If you do happen to have struggled with any of these habits in the past and you want to share your experience, I'd love to hear it, so stick it down in the comments and I'll have a read through. I'm always really interested in what you guys have to say. Do subscribe to the channel if you're new, and leave a like rating if you enjoyed the video. But otherwise, that's all for today's video. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.